Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Please hit the like, subscribe. If you hit the subscribe button, please hit the notification bell for all so you'll be notified of all the new content I'll be pushing. It's very important to help grow my channel. Um, I'm trying to grow this channel, and we're going to do another episode of from a PO's perspective, which is me. I have a documentary basically of my life history and how I was a criminal and became a cop, got into law enforcement. And I'm not going to give it all away, as I said in my previous videos. And I wanted, so yeah, that's me right there. That's me when I was a PO. And I wanted to get into talking about an inmate versus a convict. And everybody's got their own opinion of an inmate and a convict. And I was, when I was younger, got in trouble. Okay. And then as I got, I went to the county jail. You're an inmate. A lot of people call people in prison inmates. But I have my own take on that, and everybody has their own opinion. So if you leave a comment down below of what you believe an inmate versus a convict is, because I'm going to give you my perspective on what that means to me in my line of work that I was in. This is just one career. Um, like I said, if you follow my channel, and if you watch my life history of growing up, and I haven't got to the point where I'm getting there, where I start. Well, I mean, I'm already doing criminal stuff, but I'm not an adult yet. So one of the things is I was a PO, and in my last two videos, it was particularly chomos and pedophiles, sex offenders is the topic. And I'm going to touch base on one case that I remember and the difference between the convict and an inmate. So to me, in that profession I was in, an inmate was the younger generation, the younger guys, or guys that didn't do very much time, because in Ohio they changed the laws, and I believe it was 1998, I believe it was. Could be 97, 98, 99. It was around that era, but I'm pretty sure it was 98. Anyways, they came out with this PRC, which is post release control. Now, what that did was, so I'm just going to take, for instance, a charge of, say, uh, robbery. We'll just take robbery, for instance, okay? Or aggravated robbery. Doesn't matter. And this guy gets sentenced. Well, in the old days, okay, if this guy was sentenced to robbery or aggravated robbery, let's say his sentence, let's say, was carried a minimum of 10 years. And so a max, he would get sentenced 10 to 15. So he had to do the 10 years minimum before he was eligible for parole. Okay, and let's just say he makes parole. Then he's got 5 years on the shelf. So if he violates, he goes back and has to do that other 5 years. And then back in those days, you had these old cats that were, well, not even just old, but that done time like that. I mean, they got a robbery charge and they're doing a 10 to 15 year bit. Okay. And let's just say they did the 10 years flat. I mean, the 10 years, and then they uh, got out on parole, and then they had to keep their nose clean. If they didn't, they had to go back and they got revoked, and they would go do their 5 years on the shelf. That's the way it was. Well, an inmate, and convicts were respectful. They had respect. They had respect, I'm sure, in prison, and that respect carried on to the real world when they were released. So when I dealt with them, I had a totally different rapport with them because they were very respectful. They were very honest. If they screwed up or they did something wrong, I'm not going to say people didn't run, if they did something wrong. I'm saying, but they carried themselves a different way. They carried themselves with some pride. Now, to me, an inmate, so they changed the law in Ohio to PRC. They changed the laws. In Ohio, you have 5 felonies that you can be charged with now. Back in the day, before that, it was 4. Okay. So you got a felony 1, which is like murder, first degree murder. Even weed was a felony 1, depending on how much quantity you had. It was crazy. So it's the most harsh or the highest felony you could get. Felony 2 would be, second degree murder. It could be aggravated assault. You, where you bodily injury, you really hurt somebody, put them in a wheelchair, whatever. But you didn't kill them. Felony 3 was a mixture. A felony 4, and then they came out with a felony 5, which a felony 5 used to be the highest misdemeanor. Misdemeanor 1, which is the highest misdemeanor you could have. They made that into a felony 5. So if you got a felony 5, 4, you automatically get probation. Okay? Unless you had a lengthy criminal history, your rap sheet's a mile long. Okay, and then a 3 normally was probation, depending on, again, your criminal history. If you're a career criminal, you get a felony 3, you're probably going to go to prison, do some time. But because they changed that law, you're not going to do near as much time as you did prior to that. So these inmates now, I call them inmates, a lot of them. I mean, there's still a lot of convicts in there, but inmates now get a robbery charge, let's say, or an aggravated robbery charge. They might get 5 years. Let's say they get 5 years, or they get 7 years. Let's say they get a 5-year sentence. They're getting 5 years, and they're out in 2 post release control. Then they get put on probation or parole. And then if they screw up, they could only send them back like 30 days at a time, unless they really, caught another case. But convicts conduct themselves way differently. Inmates haven't done a long stint of time in prison, meaning, I don't care, they've been to prison 4 times, but they only did 2 years. They were out for 2 years. They got a year. They were out for 3 years. They got 2 more years, or 3 years, or 5 years. And granted, 5 years is a long time, but under the old law, these guys were getting tagged 10, 15, 20 years for crimes. And that's my perspective. They're disrespectful. They're not hard workers. And I'm not saying all of them are like that, the inmates. But it's that generation is changed, and the generation of convicts that I was dealing with had done long term sentences. They did a 10, a 15, a 20, a 25-year bid. They get released. Like I said, and what's crazy in Ohio is we don't have the four. We don't have the four here. And so back when in the convict days, yeah, they had the AB, but Ohio is not the culture or the diversity of ethnic ethnicity. I'm sorry about that. Ethnicity here back then was very. It was a shock. Like I said, it was a culture shock for me because being from California, being in county jail, being in prison, you know what I mean. You got your four, your big four, okay. And Ohio doesn't have that, or they did have somewhat like that because the population in Ohio is white, black, very few Hispanics. Back now, again, we're talking back in the day, very, very few Asians or other ethnicities, races. Now there's a lot more races, but so back then it was white. The big So if you would break it down to cars, like California, you would have a white car, the AB, and then the black car. But then the black car was into segregated into like 3 or 4 cars. And it wasn't so much Bloods and Crips as in Ohio as it was where you were from, city wise. Because in Ohio, you have big cities. You have Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, and then like Dayton is getting big. So, but it was mainly the three, but I'd say Dayton and could have been a four. So that black car was split up into, let's just say three: Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. And then you have the white car, the AB. So if you broke that all down, because again, there wasn't very many Hispanics here, there wasn't very many Asian, um, Native American. There was not a lot of other races. Like I told you, I think if you guys watch my life story, which I tell, I'm on part 6. I'm going to be releasing part 7. I talk about all that. How I came from California, born and raised, and all starting from when I was a little kid. My neighborhood was all races, all race, not racist, all races. So, um, a lot of my friends were Filipino. My adopted family was Filipino. My best friend was Mexican. I had several best friends and friends, whites, Mexican, a lot of Mexican friends. A lot of in the neighborhood was like that. There were some blacks in the neighborhood too. We were all friends. Everybody got along with everybody. It wasn't politics. The politicking in Ohio is totally different. But when I came to Ohio for the first time, it was a culture shock because there was only one black family in a town, a city that my dad lived in. And it was like that for a lot of cities, other than the bigger cities like Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati, which is the blacks. There's whites from there too, but that was the majority black. And they had basically like 3 cars because they were beefing against each other because they're from Cleveland, they're from Columbus, they're from Cincinnati, you know. And then you had the AB. Anyway, so I had a gentleman, well, I don't even want to call him. I've had several convicts, and then more inmates than convicts. Let's just put it that way. Um, we'll get into the sex offender since I did 2 videos on that, and there's way more stories I could tell about that. I'm going to talk to you about one particular convict. I considered a convict that was a sex offender. He was a pedophile. He was a rapo. So he, when I got him, he was he had just done a little over 15. No, take that back. A little over 20 years out of a 25-year sentence. So he did a 20-year bit, a little over 20-year bit, and he was maxed at 25 years. Okay, so I get him. My job is when you get somebody and you get their paperwork, of course, they have to have somewhere to go. I have to go out and check that place out. And of course, they've been in prison that long. They're not going to have a place in their name, a house they own. Well, sometimes they do. So this particular guy was going to live with his sister and her husband. So I go out to the house, talk to his sister and her husband, and I said, look, here's the deal. He has his own bedroom. Okay. Because, there's certain rules that they have to have that fits the bill, the neighborhood, what his rules are, what his, not his rules, his stipulations are on his release. So we got to make sure that he's not going to set himself up by releasing him somewhere that I couldn't let that happen. So I talked to them. They have to sign a waiver with all the rules on it stating that I have the right to come into their house at any point in time. And I worked the streets a lot. Me and my partner always worked out in the streets a lot, more than inside the office, because I felt like it was more productive being out on the streets, doing house checks, work checks, chasing people down that have warrants, because we did all the warrants for the department. So we were always busy on the street. I loved it. I loved working on the street. I can't stand sitting behind a desk like I'm doing right now. It's even hard to do videos, just sit here. I get anxious. But anyway, so they're signing off that we can come in their house at any time, search their house. If we believe that, if like I have a warrant or whatever, nobody answers the door, and I know that he's in there, I'm going to kick the door in or whatever. Or we're going to kick the door, and somebody's going to kick it in, and there's nothing they can do about it. They can't come back. Repercussion. There's no repercussions on us. They have to sign that. If they don't, he can't live there. So they signed it. He comes in. Again, he's a rapo. I look at his jacket though. I always, study everybody's jacket before I get them and personally speak to them. So I'm reading his jacket. This guy got 25 years. Okay. And he's an older cat now. I mean, he just did 20 years. I believe he was 30 years old when he caught this case. I'm looking at his jacket. I'm looking at the investigation. I'm looking at everything. And there's a lot of loopholes in that investigation. I mean, they didn't have DNA testing back then when he got his case. And we all know that, back then, you could say this person did whatever. They couldn't check for DNA. There was no video cameras nowhere. No cell phones, none of that stuff. So you just took the witness's word for it and rolled with it. So anyway, this guy, so I read his jacket, everything. He had never been in trouble the whole 20 years he was down. He didn't have one write up. Now, he was a rapo. And I had explained to you guys before, they have a prison. And I don't think that prison was there before or when he got locked up. There's a prison in Ohio that they send probably 75% maybe of the sex offenders to. So they basically have their own prisons. So they don't have to get their asses kicked on a daily basis, get removed, taken out, whatever. And but this guy did time in a prison, a pretty rough prison actually. In California, jeez, here we go. I'm from California, so I do that. Ohio doesn't really have the prisons like California has set up. So California's got, you got Pelican Bay, you got the shoe, and then you got the shoe at, what is it, Corcoran? They had the shoe. Um, they have two maximum security prisons now, and I think at that time they only had one. And but anyways, he was at a pretty rough prison, but he did it. He worked in the kitchen, and then he also was a porter. Was job detail. He even had recommendations from the warden, some COs, the officers, the sergeant, lieutenant, captain, about his whole behavior. So it was weird. It was kind of a weird case because I'm like, man, COs, the warden giving letters, writing on him, good, all good stuff. But he still did that 20 year. But this was to get him out, so he didn't have to do that 25 years. But he still had the 5 years on the shelf. So if he screwed up, he's going back for 5 years. He was very respectful. He had nothing. He'd been down 20 years. He didn't have much family. His sister and her husband, that was really it. Friends, no friends. Um, he, you know, he came in and he was still in his state issued uniform, state issued stuff. He had jacket, boots, the fake jeans kind of looking things. They're jeans, but the real thick, heavy duty, dark ass jeans. You know what I'm talking about. And that's what he had. That's all he had. So we used to have a rapport with Goodwill in the Salvation Army. So we could give vouchers to people that needed clothing and whatever they needed to get. So I give him a couple vouchers to get him some clothes and things like that because he had nothing. And I went over to, so we went over the rules. He was very respectful. Like I said, convict. And again, he's a sex offender. I know what you guys are thinking, and I'm still the same way. I feel the same way. But when I read his jacket and I read everything about him, I'm like, just a lot. There was a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of holes, loopholes, or a lot of holes in the story that he got convicted of that didn't make sense. And again, that's back in the old days. Do I think he did it? I don't know. I'm on the fence. I mean, my honest opinion, my honest opinion, I don't think he did it. From everything I read there, I don't think he did it. But that's beside the point. He was convicted. He got 25. He did 20. Whatever. Very respectful person to me. Manners, the whole 9 yards. Conducted himself very, very well. So I give him the vouchers, whatever, and I said I'm gonna be doing. He had to come see me 3 times a week, and then I can do random house checks at any point in time. So I do a house check like a couple weeks in. It's a couple weeks after he, gets on paper. I go to his house, go to his bedroom, and I'm gonna tell you what his bedroom. It was a small bedroom, so it looked like a prison cell. It was set up like a prison cell. The way he had all his hygiene items, he had snacks over here, his hygiene items over here. His bed looked like a bunk from from a cell, a metal bunk, uh, and a smaller map. Not the little pancakes they give you in jail, but it was just a twin size. It his room looked. But I'm going to tell you something. All his clothes were ironed, folded, neatly put away, or hung up. His bed was military. He'd never been in the military. His bed was made, no creases, the corners tucked in. I mean, it was just perfect. Pillow, everything. This guy was he was militant. And when I went in there and when I was talking to him, I said, "Well, where's your bedroom? I want to see your bedroom." We went in there. He stood there like at attention, with his, um, well, he had his hands, you know, like at attention, like very, and he just held himself very well. Um, I think it was like I don't know, a and a half, month and a half later, he got a job right away too. And this is another thing between a convict and an inmate. He was a convict because he'd done 20 years, 15 years, 10 years. You're a convict, more than likely. There was this plant that poured hot iron, big, huge thing. I mean, that place was roasting these guys, like black iron all over them and all this shit. And they didn't care. They hired felons because they wanted hard workers, and the convicts were hard workers. And then when they changed that law, and then you started getting these inmates, they didn't want to work. Number one, at all, and that's part of being on paper. You got to have a job or get a job, care what it's doing. They would quit, get fired, whatever, because they're lazy and they don't want to work. Convicts, on the other hand, are hard workers and they respect their bosses. They work overtime. They do everything they're supposed to do. And he was working at this plant, pouring hot ass iron, working 10, 12-hour shifts every day. He would work whatever hours they'd give him, he'd work it. I never had an issue out of that guy. Never once did I have an issue. He never not or violated or did anything to, and I used to check his house all the time. Never did he violate. So convict. Oh yeah, I think I already showed you that picture. Yeah, that's me. If I didn't show you, showing you again. That was me back in the day when I was a PO. I got other pictures I'm going to share when I do my other, when I keep going on my other videos. I'll be posting pictures, and like when I got in trouble, I'll be posting the newspaper articles on that and things of that nature. So you tell me, what is your opinion or what is your thoughts on what I just talked about? Convict versus inmate. What's the difference? To me, inmates, I don't care how long they did. Well, they don't do long stints anymore. Their bids are short because of the law here. This is just here. I don't know about California anymore, and I don't know about any other states. I'm just talking about here. They're slapping them on the hand for doing stuff that other guys are doing 10 and 15 years for. And did it make them a better person? I believe so. Because these new ones, when they change the law, shit, they don't care about nothing. They go back for a year, 6 months, and it's just like a party. They get back out, and, oh yeah, I've been in prison. No. You did 10, 15, 20 years. Yeah, you're a convict. You did some time. Respect. You held it down. But give me your opinion in the comments. What do you think the difference between an inmate and a convict? I'm just telling you from my perspective as a PO and all the people that I had to supervise and all the dealings I had with. There was convicts and there was inmates, and I had little convicts compared to I did a shit ton of inmates. Disrespectful, lazy, don't want to work. You know what I mean? Just off the hook. Convicts, very respectful, hard workers. You know, that's my take on it. You guys let me know in the comments down below. Again, hit the like and subscribe button. Share the video. That'd be great. Trying to get some views here and get my channel started. I have another channel, but this is my second channel. My other channel has nothing to do with my life history or any of this. So I don't want to say what my other channel is because it has nothing to do with it. Totally different. This is something that I want to share and hopefully help people with. But yeah, that's my take on a convict versus an inmate. And you let me know. And we'll talk to you soon. Hope everybody stays safe. Have a great day. Till next time.